The weekly message of the United Church of Christ of Homostown, Pennsylvania, a podcast version of our worship service. To learn more and listen to the rest of the worship, check us out online at homostownucc.org.
For you to get the most out of this morning, I need you to think about three people. It can be in your family, it can be some of your closest friends. But I would prefer that you choose three people who are a little strange in your family, friends. I would prefer you not choose people in the church. That might get awkward. But in the story of the Good Samaritan, we have four people. We have a man who was traveling seemingly by himself. Now, the journey from Jerusalem to Jericho is not a journey you would take by yourself. It is a drop of about 3,600 feet during that journey. In other words, it's a rugged journey going up and down a mountainside, and it is very, very dangerous. It is a journey fraught with opportunities for robbers and criminals to take advantage of an unsuspecting person. Obviously, this is what happened to this man. He has been robbed, he has been beaten, he has been thrown by the side of the road, and I'm not sure what half dead means, but I think it's not good. Then we have three people. Now, these three people are, they're in the inner group. I mean, they're people who would be known, but they're not people who would be There are three people who would be in the inner group, but they're not necessarily people who you would be able to say exactly that you know what they'll do in any situation. They're a little strange. You have family members like that. Family members who can be a little awkward in social situations. Family members who, due to past experiences, might not always be trustworthy. There are three people who, well, you're not really sure that you can predict how they'll act in a particular situation. First, we have the priest. Now, if you were a Jew hearing Jesus tell this parable, you would immediately think, yeah, priests. A number of years ago, I was doing graduate work at a large Catholic university, and I became friends in my study group with a priest. And he told me, as we were talking one day, just getting to know each other a little bit, he said it's really changed in the last few years. Used to be that when I walked through the neighborhood, I was universally respected. Now people at best treat me like I'm a used car salesman. At worst, well, you can imagine. This was in Boston, and it was during the beginning of the days of the crisis in the Catholic Church. So you've got somebody who is in a position of authority, who usually is treated with respect, but everyone there would know of a reason why the priest wouldn't stop. And I think you probably do too. That person may be only half dead, but maybe they're really dead. And if you touch a dead person, you are ceremonially unclean for 7 days. that might be enough for the priest to not be able to do their temple responsibility. There is a reason you can think of as a Jew for a priest not doing this, in addition to not always being sure that the priest is the most trustworthy person. There are certainly people in the area at the time of Jesus who didn't trust priests at all. People like who lived in the community in the mountains where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. We have quite a bit of writing diatribes against the temple worship from those folks. The second person is a Levite. Now, I don't know if you know anything about how that works, but the Levites were worship leaders in the temple, and it was a hereditary position. They would be given that not because of their holiness, but because of their birth. And that led to some, I'm not sure about this guy. It's a perfect situation of not being based on the ability to do the job so much as who you know. And in the case of hereditary, it's who you really know. So, the Levite was certainly part of the establishment, but maybe there were some folks who always found them a little questionable, and everybody in the group could understand why a Levite might not go over and touch him, because that might mean that he can't do his job. It might mean that he loses money in this transaction. It might mean that it was just not the smart thing to do to stop and help. Maybe you've been in a situation where you're driving along the road and there's somebody at an intersection, they're standing with a sign, and well, you're 5 or 6 cars back, and if you stopped at the intersection and gave them something, you might have beeping cars behind you. Whether or not you think that it is a good thing to do that, there are reasons why you might not help. The Jews would have understood that. And then comes the Samaritans. The Samaritan, some people kind of, build up the disdain that Jews and Samaritans have for each other, but that's a little overblown. Both the Jews and the Samaritans considered each other to be true Israelites. But the Jews thought the Samaritans were weird at best. They certainly didn't know where to worship. They worshiped not in Jerusalem at the temple. It would be like somebody in your family who walks in on Easter Sunday for the feast and say, I've decided to convert and leave the faith of our family. You still love them, you still care about them, but what's going on? It's a little weird. So Jesus presents this scenario, and I hope in your mind you're still back with the 3 people you know thinking, who would help? Who can I predict would help? And who is going through in their head, well, does this person deserve to be helped? The interesting thing is, the person who is there in need of help, we know less about this person than any of the other 3. We don't know their heritage, we don't know their job title, we don't know what their religion is, and we don't know anything about them except they're bleeding. Who stops to help? Who in your group of 3 friends you've been thinking about would stop to help? Who would disregard their social situation, disregard that they need to be somewhere in 15 minutes, disregard the possible disruption to their daily schedule, and just jump in and help? Would you? Would you consider how much of an inconvenience this is? Would you consider, well, I'm not a doctor or nurse. Would you consider the ramifications to your life of helping save theirs? Now, we all know that the teacher who was asking Jesus a question wasn't really so much interested in the question, who is my neighbor, as the corollary. Who is not my neighbor? Who don't I have to help? Who don't I have to be responsible for? Who don't I have to be disrupted by? Who don't I have to care about? Man was talking to his neighbor about the things that neighbors try not to talk about very much anymore. You know, the kind of things. Kind of things that you kind of wish we didn't have to talk about sometimes, and those people keep bringing it up, you know, like politics and stuff. And the one neighbor said to the other, well, you know, Jesus said love your neighbor, and the other neighbor said, but those people are not my neighbor. Who is your neighbor? It's part of the problem, isn't it? Well, here's the point of all this, because everything I've said so far you knew, and you could play with it, and you know, whatever you want to do with it. But here's the deal. When Jesus said, love your neighbor, which certainly is said in Scripture or other places, Jesus didn't invent this. Where do we learn how to love? We learn to love in family first, right? That's where we learn to love. We receive love first. Non-negotiable, absolute essential of being a baby is you need to be loved. And we have all the research to know that babies need to be hugged, babies need to be touched, babies need to have human contact. We learn to love in our families. That's as inner a group, an inside group, as you can imagine. Well, hopefully next we learn to love in church. Now, there are certainly people who know how to love who are not part of a faith community. But one of the things that faith communities must do is learn how to love one another. We all know the song, they'll know we are Christians by our love. Well, that comes from passages of Scripture that talk about the idea they'll know you by the way you love one another. That's loving in the group. And here's what we can't love people outside our group until we learn to love people inside our group. If you're sitting around in a social situation and people hear you trashing people within this group, if you hear of people who are gossiping about people in your family, what do? I don't know. I don't know what you do. I know nobody in my presence better say anything about my wife or my kids. I've been a pastor. I've been trashed for years by folks. But my family? See, as a pastor, I will tell my friends who have not been associated with the churches I've pastored or spoken at or anything like that, who live a long way away. We've got a lot of friends in the Boston area and we're down here. And I tell them, I say, please, the worst thing you can do for me when we get together is tell me how upset and frustrated you are with your church. Because you see, I know folks in my church talk that way. I want to hear how much you appreciate your pastor and love your church. Not saying they're perfect, but I want to hear that from you. You know why? Because that's a blessing to me. I want to hear when I come to this church how much you love one another. And I have. When I've asked those of you I've talked to at length about what do you appreciate most about your church, the universal answer is we love one another. Well, I've got another, 9 weeks to find out if you mean that. I'm not judging, I'm just observing. And I know the people out there are observing. They will know you are followers of Jesus. First, because how you love one another. And I hope you've got that settled, so then you can go out and love a world that is bruised beyond belief. They'll know we are Christians by our love.
This has been the weekly worship from the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown. No matter who you are, or where you are, on life's journey, you are welcome here. Join us online or in person, at 104 East Main Street in Hummelstown, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to your fellowship.